Hello, and welcome to another episode of Costumer Confidential, where you get a little backstage peek at what goes on behind the scenes at the Pickering Museum Village. We have actually quite an extensive costume collection, or I should say reproductive clothing collection, and we are able to clothe our staff and our volunteers for time periods ranging from 1790 right up to about 1920. So today we're going to talk about day caps and why they were worn and who wore them. So as you can see, I'm wearing a day cap, and mine is actually a vintage one that I bought at a clothing show in Sturbridge, Massachusetts. And it is a very typical of probably about 1830, 1840. It's got a lot of beautiful, you can't see it probably close up, but it's got a beautiful lot of white work and ruffling of the edges. And why did women wear these caps anyway? Well, there's a couple of good reasons for this. Number one, here's a cap from, this is a cap from the Revolutionary War period, so say about 1770 to 1790. And sometimes women would wear a ribbon across the brim here. And this kind of cap, the hair would be kept a lot cleaner if it was worn in a cap. Because if you think about the fact that you're working around a wood fire, so there's a lot of smoke, smuts, ashes flying around. First of all, this would keep your hair a lot cleaner. It was also considered a bit of a modesty thing, and certainly in the going into the 19th century, once you were married, you pretty well wore a cap every day, and this cap would be worn all the time within the house. When you went out, of course, you would put a bonnet on over this cap. And then, of course, the cap makes a lovely little frill on the inside of the bonnet, which is also nice. But you would always be wearing one of these caps inside the house. It varied in some places as to whether unmarried women wore them. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. Certainly during the Regency period, young women didn't wear caps. And it was considered that if you put a cap on, you were then saying, well, I'm resigned to be an old maid because now I've donned my cap. Because old maids were expected to wear caps as well as married women. So when you had to don a cap at the ripe old age of 28 because you hadn't yet snagged a husband, well, then you'd still be wearing a cap. So there we are. Now, some of the caps that we use at the village are much plainer. They're not as fancy because, of course, we're in the backwoods of Pickering Township. So there's one there, but it still, as you see, has a nice little ruffle across the front. And then this one has a little bit of decoration, a bit of ruching on the back. Now, the strings can either be tied under the chin, as I have done, or if you have long strings like this, you can actually tie them at the back to keep them out of the way of the fire and the cooking, which is a very practical thing. Here's a cap from about 1840. This one is nicely ruffled and has actually a double row of ruching. And what we do for practicality also, the back of the caps usually has ties, and then you can tighten the ties to fit the individual head. This one is quite lovely. This one is also 1840s. And actually you get a much nicer look with a cap if you starch it. So we do try to starch them when we can. Now again, if you were in the backwoods of Pickering Township, would you be starching your stuff? Well, you might be starching your Sunday best in the mid to late century, but certainly not when you were in the early settler stage. So, but it does give a much nicer look to the bonnet for sure. Now another mid-century look, so let's say we're going now into the 60s. There's a cute little cap there that has some beautiful ruched ribbon on it. That would be considered very nice. And you know, ladies would be embellishing their caps as they saw fit. So if they were very good with a needle, they might put a little bit more decor on. If they were good with embroidery, they might be embroidered. It just was a very individual choice. Another type of cap that you often saw worn inside is a net cap like this that has beautiful, it has very fine cotton underneath and then has netting over top. And then as you can see, it's embellished with ribbon ruching and some beautiful ribbon work. And that one would completely cover your hair. Now, if you were going into the evening, you wanted something a bit more dressy. So the other ones I'm going to show you today are definitely evening caps. This is the kind of thing you would wear if you were going out for the evening to, say, a ball or to a special evening event. So this one is a beautiful one made of velvet, and it has antique lace at the back, which is quite lovely. This one is a saucy little number that sits on the top of your head actually and kind of just beautifully makes your hairstyle look fantastic. And as you can see, it has some beautiful antique lace lappets at the back, And you have that netting look with the colored fabric underneath. It's just beautiful. We have a volunteer at the village who makes a lot of these caps. She is an amazing milliner, Roberta, and she just is inspired to make lovely things. And she, as she said, the cap tells her what it wants to have on for decoration. This is one that was newly completed. It's to go with a ball gown that we made for one of our younger volunteers. This is definitely a youthful look. You certainly wouldn't want to wear this if you were of a certain mature age, because you would look like mutton dressed as lamb. This is definitely for a young lady, as you can see with all the pink and green and so forth. But isn't that a pretty one? And look at the bow at the back. Just lovely. And finally, this was a very typical example too of the type of headdress that was worn for evening attire. So just almost like a sort of a tiara in a way, but it's made of silk flowers and ribbon, and that would have just been pinned into the hair, and then the hair would have been quite elaborately dressed around it. So that's a little bit of a look at caps. So what do you think? Would you have liked to wear a cap like this? Well, you know what? If you come and volunteer at the Pickering Museum Village, we'll put you in a cap, no problem. So thanks, and stay tuned for our next episode.